Hello and welcome to Life with Francy podcast, a place where you will find all kinds of conversation like mental health, self-love, self-care, trauma, hobbies, and more. With this podcast, I want to create a place where we support one another to get to the next level in personal life and business life. Hope you enjoy this episode. Now, let's get this show started. On today's episode, I have the pleasure to talk to Andy. Um, and I just lost it. Oh my goodness. I'm glad I got a virtual assistant now so she can edit this part. Come on. On this episode, I have the pleasure to talk to Andy, who is an emerging author, experienced church leader, and accomplished speaker living in the San Francisco Bay Area. Andy holds a Master of Arts in Christian Apologetics from Biola University. Andy's educations, coupled with his life experience struggling to reconcile his faith and sexuality, inform his writing on the subject. His career in emergency services gives Andy a pragmatic approach to life. So I am so excited to get this conversation going. So let's start it. Welcome, Andy, to the show. So, what is life with Andy?
Thanks. Good to be here. What is life like? What is life with Andy? Well, let's see. Life with Andy today. It's the trailing end of a heat wave. I do lap swimming for my cardio, and that's what I decided to do today in 103-degree heat. So that was life
Woo!
today.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot.
It was a good life. Well, it was a good life today. And then but let's see. So what did it take to get into a swimming pool in 2022? In my start in high school. I was a mess in high school. In fact, my parents went to, they had these parent teacher conferences. Maybe this was junior high, but my parents went to the junior high parent teacher conference and looked at these teachers and said, we don't know what to do with Andy, and we're looking for some advice. Any ideas you got? And the one of the teachers looked back at my mom, and he had me several years because he had been moving up in grade as we were moving up in grade, and he said, actually, I've got the same problems with my kid, and I was gonna ask you how you deal with it. I was a mess. And I was a difficult kid to deal with when I was a kid. And so then in my 20s, I became a born again Christian, and went and got my master's degree in Christian apologetics, which is the art of art and science, or theological discipline of defending the faith of Christianity. And then in my 30s, I got sober, because there was a little bit of a rub between my sexuality and my religious beliefs. And then in my 40s, I came out, and turning 50, I wrote a book about it. So that's where I'm at
Wow.
today. It's like this progression of trying to figure out. My mom was asking how to deal with me. I was trying to figure out how to deal with me, and I think today I've got a pretty good I've got a pretty good life in dealing with who I am and accepting who I am and loving who I am. And those were things I wasn't capable of even 15 years ago. So I'm really in a good spot.
Wow, I'm just speechless right now. I mean, we all can relate about being a hot mess in high school. I mean, come on. If you got your life together, sorry, I think this is not the podcast for you. Because oh my gosh, high school for me was a hot mess in 20s, but you didn't come out till your 40s?
I came out to my parents when I was 40 years old. Um, and uh and it was interesting because my parents have always gone to a church that was extremely accepting of LGBTQ people. In fact, they were performing same-sex wedding ceremonies as early as the mid 1970s. And so very, very accepting church. But my dad made the comment that if you had told me this 20 years ago, it would have gone over like a lead balloon. Uh, so it's not easy it's different. I think it might be different when it's other people's kids. I'm not sure. To-
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but he said, hey, it's 2013. What do I, it's like, it's okay, we're good. I actually have more faith in my dad than I think he gives himself credit for. He has always committed to loving his kids, and my mom the same way. My mom probably more so than my dad, uh loving loving their kids the way they are and not the way they ought to be. So I had pretty good parents.
Oh, that's awesome. So did you always know, or did you always knew, or like,
I was in denial. When
mm,
I was in high school, um there were guys that really, gave me butterflies in my stomach that I was really, really attracted to. And it just never registered with me that, yeah, dude, that's what happens when you're gay. Or bi, or just at least not straight, right? Like straight guys typically don't fall in love with guys. That just doesn't, happen. In my mid 20s, I remember saying to myself, just having a little conversation with myself like we do, and I thought, man, for a straight guy, I sure do date a lot of men.
hmm, damn.
So, so I was in denial. And then finally, when I got sober, my sponsor, at the end of this one step that you do, my sponsor said, hey, you're not straight. And I'm like, well, no kidding. And he said, well, you need to figure that out. You need to figure out how to deal with that, because if you don't, you're going out again. Like you won't stick around.
Yeah.
And so I went through a process of it was a little bit of experimenting with coming out to various people very slowly, um, kind of dipping my toe in the water, but also just learning how to accept this part of myself that I had tried to change it. I mean, in my 20s, I went through conversion therapy, counseling, and that sort of thing to try to not be gay anymore. And obviously, it didn't work. But it just it was that was what started that conversation, is what started the process of me knowing I need to come face to face with this part of myself and figure out what to do with it, for as a way of accepting it, rather than trying to make it go away or ignore it or call it something else or something, disingenuous.
Wow. Yeah, I can't relate to a certain point. Just because I always knew, for me, I'm bisexual. So, for my family, it was more of like, they're very religious and I love them to death, and their beliefs are their beliefs, but it's pretty much I was going to hell. So like I always thought that there was something wrong with me for being attracted to women. So I really didn't um reach out or anything like that. It wasn't until like I moved over here from Puerto Rico, and it was wild. It was wild after that, and I just didn't care, and I wasn't open about it or whatever. But now in my 30s, I'm like, who gives a crap?
Yeah.
I'm me, love me or hate me. Like I don't even care anymore.
Yeah.
But it took a long way, and there was drugs, there was alcohol, and a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, because I just couldn't be myself. So I can
Yeah.
relate a little bit on that part of struggling becoming yourself.
I was always jealous of the people that could say, look, this is me, deal with it. I was jealous of those folks, because for whatever reason I couldn't give myself permission to do that. And to this day, that's not me. I'm not a this is me, deal with it guy. Um, but I'm a this is me, and this is me.
Yeah.
Like today, a big difference today is, um I took over. I'm a manager. I manage emergency programs for a large company, and so I took over a new team, and the team said, you've got some big shoes to fill. the manager that just retired was really good in all these different ways, and you're going to have to really strive to fill her shoes. And so when it came my turn to talk, I said, I really don't feel like I need to fill anyone's shoes. I feel like my key to success right now is just to be the best me. Bring the best Andy to the table every day. Uh, and I'm not your old manager, and that's good news and bad news.
Yeah.
There's but it is what it is, and so it's that not needing to be somebody else. That's what I mean. That's really what got me drunk was I was managing all these facades. I was going to an evangelical church and teaching. I was a leader there. I was working for a fire department, so a very conservative environment. And so I had an image to create there. I had my family life. I had, social stuff, and I had my gay friends. And the only time I could really let my guard down was when I was with my gay friends, and I could just relax and sigh a breath, take a breath of fresh air and just relax. And so now that take a breath of fresh air, relax and be myself, that's 7 days a week now instead of it just being 1 or 2 nights where I could break loose and go hide. And I lived near Pasadena, California, and then Long Beach was about a 45-minute drive, and it has a really good gay district down there. And I had a bunch of friends that lived in the neighborhood, so once or twice a week I'd go and crash down there, and work. And my work was right in between the two, so a couple nights a week I'd go down there and just hang out with my gay friends and just I could just let it hang loose. But today that's 7 days a week instead of 2 days a week.
I love that. That's awesome. So, how did the book and everything, your mission, that to talk about it with people, go from,
Yeah.
being so reserved to now wanting to be in a podcast and tell your story?
Yeah, I never so I was even living in the Bay Area. I moved up here about 10 years ago, and um living in the Bay Area, which is extremely accepting. I mean, everybody kind of associates San Francisco with gay rights, and kind of on the leading edge of the progressive gay movement. I used to call it the epicenter of the gay universe, but people said that there were other cities that would disagree with me on that, so I don't say that anymore. But even being here, I was afraid to come out to people. I was really nervous about it, um, and so I thought, coming out on Facebook, I don't need to come out on Facebook. I don't need to come out with all my friends in high school. I don't need to do any of that stuff. I need to be okay with who I am. I found a church that's extremely affirming, that I can be any level of leadership or any level of service in that church, exactly who I am today, without having to change the unchangeable. Um, and I've got a boyfriend. I've had a boyfriend for about 7 years now. It's just everything is great. Um, and I had this conversation with a woman I met at a Christmas party, and she told me about her 12-year-old son. Well, her son, who was then in his 20s, but when he was 12 or 13, he approached her and said that he was gay, and they went to a non-affirming Christian church, and he loved Jesus, he loved the Bible, he loved his church friends, like the church, all that stuff, but the church was not affirming. So had he come out in that group, they would have just told him to leave, as happened to other people in that church group. So she was talking about some of their current strategies on how to deal with it and all this, and so I learned two things from that conversation. Number one was that I had a lot to bring to the table with my conservative training and theology and the Bible and all that stuff. And then the second thing I learned about it, I realized on the way home, because on my drive home, um, I thought about what it must have been like, because it was hard for me to come out at 40. It was
I
hard for
bet.
me. It's hard for me to come out sometimes today, and yet, what was it? What must it have been like if for a 13-year-old to have that conversation and come out? And I thought, wow, and I wept. I cried about it. I was just like, that floors me. So so I thought with the combination of those two things, maybe I've got something that I could put in writing and help people. and do a little research and do my homework and figure that out. So that's what really, and that mom and I have become really good friends since then, along with many other people that I've talked to and gotten to you know become friends with in the process of writing the book. But and the book is called "Tried to Be Straight: Options for Gay Christians." And if you think about a spectrum of self acceptance from 1 to 10, one meaning completely in the closet, afraid to walk down a street with a rainbow flag on it. I'm just no gay anything for me. Uh, and 10 being completely self-accepting, self-affirming, you're good, right? Nobody needs to. I'm writing this book for people on that spectrum of about 1 to 3, really unaffirming of themselves, really dipping their toe in the water. Um, so from that perspective, it's written using conservative language. I quote as many evangelical, conservative, fundamentalist leaders as possible, rather than quoting liberal leaders, because I know when I was a conservative, fundamentalist, evangelical, I wouldn't read anything that was written by somebody who was to the left of me, which was incidentally most people. So
Yeah.
so I had to reach people using their language, with a message that most people aren't ready to hear. The message from the conservative Christian movement is don't be gay. And the answer to the question, well, what if I am gay, is don't be gay.
Yeah. And how did you did you struggle or had any feelings with the church as you're coming out? Because as for me, like I have always had to try to look for a church. Well, yeah, I gave up on church a long time ago, but
Well, it
but when I
depends on your
did try
background.
it, I was looking
Yeah.
for accepting one.
Yeah. I mean, so there are more than 40,000 denominations of Christian denominations around worldwide.
What?
40,000, yeah. So the really the age-old answer to a Christian that is frustrated with their church is to go down the street and start a new one. Um,
Yeah,
so
that's how it's looking
I
nowadays.
mean, unless you're in a group that has a very specific organization like Roman Catholicism, you're not going to go and start a new Roman Catholic church down the street. There's only one Roman Catholic church, and they've got one pope, and that's. But as far as Protestantism goes, there are many many churches, and so there's a chapter in the book on not only how to choose a church, but why is that even important? Why is it even important that a Christian go to church? What is that? What's in it for me? In that. And so
Tell
there's
me,
some
why is it important?
so so a lot of the change, I think, theologically, um that a person can go through is, we look at our relationship with God as a performance based.
Yeah.
So almost like God is this cosmic Santa Claus that he knows when you've been good, bad, or good, right? And he's
Yes.
making a list and checking it twice, right? So so my relationship with God is based on whether or not I sin. And so now all the things that I do that are sinning, and then Jesus came along and said, no, wait a minute. So you thought that you were okay not committing adultery, meaning you don't go and sleep around. But when you lust after somebody who's not your spouse, you are committing adultery in your heart. Oops.
Yep.
Okay, you don't go out and kill people. Got it. Good on you. But when you go to somebody and call them an idiot or a fool, you've committed murder. You've committed a murder with your lips, and it's like, ooh. So Jesus kind of raised the bar to this level of perfection that inside and out. And so when you begin measuring yourself on this standard of sin and not sin, you end up with a very challenged view of yourself at the end of the day. So the
Yeah.
way I like to look at our relationship with God is one that Jesus was very much for, which is how am I serving the people around me? So the church for me is an outlet for me to serve in a holy and godly way. And if the church doesn't provide an outlet for me to serve, And it could be something as simple as mopping a floor,
Mm-hmm.
or saying hello to somebody when they walk in the morning, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a job with a name tag. It's just a, I go there to get with other Christians, where we serve together, and that becomes important in a couple of other equations in my life. But that's what I believe. And the church, and I go into this in the chapter, in my chapter in my book. The church is built with people. The Bible talks about people being the living stones that build the walls of the church. And so the church is never referenced as a building, but metaphorically it's shown as a building that's built with with each of us as participants. And so it really is quite a beautiful thing when we look at the way that the church is kind of laid out in the New Testament. Not so much a beautiful thing when they're telling me I have to sit in the back row because I've labeled myself as a gay man, but but
Yeah.
but if I find the right place, if I find the right group, and I think right now I know I've found a good group to be in with. So I'm very happy getting out of bed on a Sunday morning and rushing across a bridge to get to my church.
No, 100%. I love that answer. Serving in a godly matter, like we can do that outside of church, but I love that you looking for that community as well. Because I can see it. I can see the community. I have a huge family and they all have different religions, different whatever. One goes on Sunday, the other one goes on Saturday, and the other one goes every single day.
Yeah.
So I have all kinds of people in my thing, and I have struggled because of my own issues with my family and different churches that I have gone. But I do love the community, the service, helping one another. I do love it. And when they have the message of like God loves you and this is what the Bible says, but you know, this and that, like welcoming everybody and understanding that God says a million times, love your neighbor, not
Yeah.
love your straight neighbor, not love your neighbor that doesn't have mental health issues. Love your neighbor that's not an addict, things
Right.
like that. So I do love that part, when you find the right people. So yeah, what else is there about Andy?
So so I think I, s- so this idea of growing in service, or living in service, um it kind of came out of twofold. It's all it like you said, it's all over the Bible, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. Um and part of the ways I love myself is I feed myself and I clothe myself, and I take care of myself. And I can do those things for other people when it's appropriate. In a healthy way. There's obviously there's there's ways we can get codependent about that, but we'll assume that we're talking about a healthy approach. I talk about a little bit about growing self-esteem, and I was clueless about self-esteem. In fact, a mentor of mine asked me one time, "How do you build self-esteem?" And I looked at him and I thought, I have no idea. And he said, "Well, you're in luck. I'll tell you." He said, "Go and do esteemed things." There were two answers. There were do esteemed things or esteem others. And what I learned was there's kind of a secret to spiritual growth, and that is if you do good things for other people and you try not to get caught, there's reward in your soul, and it's instantaneous. I used to think it was like, okay, I'll get to heaven and I'll have I'll have stored up, because there's a scripture passage about storing up treasures in heaven. I'm going to be It's kind of like my Jesus retirement plan. I'll have lots of treasures in heaven because I did all these good things. But really what happened was, I remember one time, this guy was all over me about your ego's out of control. You got to go do. I'll tell you what you need to do. You need to go and do something nice for somebody, and I don't even want to know what you did. You can't tell another soul what you did. And so I went out, and I thought, first thought in my head was, well, where's the fun in that? Like, I can't even get a thank you. That's why you do these nice things for people, so that other people can look at you and go, wow, what a nice guy that guy is. He just, did this thing. Well, I went and I did it anyway, even though it didn't sound cool. And what I discovered was, it was like I was on this secret mission with just me and God. And we went out and did something together, and it had an impact. And nobody knows to this day. Nobody knows what that was, how little, how big. It's just it was this thing. And so, finding opportunities to do stuff like that, then because I mean, maybe about 10 years ago, I came to this realization that one of the things that's holding me back in life is that I really hate myself. That I look in the mirror and I despise the guy who's looking back at me. And I think I had it worse than others. Some people, maybe a lot of people can relate to that. For for whatever reason, I think I had it pretty bad. And I think that goes back to some of my problems as a kid growing up. I think it goes into, some of my problems of why I was trying to hide my real self from the rest of the world.
Mhm.
Why I felt the need to put up all these facades, because I really felt like if you knew the real me, um that you wouldn't like me, because I know the real me and I don't like me.
Oh
And
yeah, I
so
have
I think that
struggled
was it.
with that too. Like the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It so what happened was I started, number one, I became honest with myself about who I was, and became willing to be honest with others about who I was. And then and that was being realistic about strengths and weaknesses, and then also accepting things that are just, my sexuality is no different than my hair color or my eye color. My hair is what my hair is. I can color it something different, but my hair, if I have blue eyes, I have blue eyes. It's not something that I had any choice over. Um, and the next thing is to try to grow as a decent person, not to please God, but to value myself, because the word esteem means value. So when you say self-esteem, what you're really talking about is value yourself. We look at a lot of these, some of these TED Talks that you listen to. I listened to a guy the other day in a TED Talk saying, the first thing I do in the morning is get up and make my bed. Why is that? Well, you're valuing yourself. You're saying, I deserve a room that is clean and neat, because I deserve to come home to a place that's neat, clean and neat. Now, I'm not saying that that's a requirement for self-esteem. I'm just saying
Yeah. Yeah.
that's one of the things that will contribute to self-esteem, is esteeming yourself. But esteeming others is something that's going to add to your value. Your value is, hey, I fed people today. Hey, part of my paycheck goes to a place that helps people that need a certain amount of help. Some of my time goes, and I'm not looking for a pat on the back, and I'm not looking for a credit, and I don't get, it's just something that I do. And then when the voices come, those little demons that say you're worthless, you suck, you don't deserve the praise you just got, you don't deserve the promotion you just got, you don't deserve the raise you just got, you can sit back and you've got a list, and you're like, all the not so good stuff I've been working on, and it's been getting better, and all the good stuff, it has been increasing. And I'm a value to my community, and here's how. I'm a uh, I'm a value to my family, and here's how. And I'm a value to people in need, and here's how. And they're real things, and that's a lot more powerful than sitting in front of a mirror and repeating some mantra like, God loves me, I'm a good person, I like myself. You can repeat those. If you don't believe that stuff, you can repeat it as much as you want until you're blue in the face. You're not going to buy it.
Yeah.
So
I have a testimony on that one because, like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, no, please go ahead. I want to hear.
So 10 years ago, I started with depression. So I had like sticky notes all over a hotel because that's where I was living at. And like,
Yeah,
you're beautiful, you're smart. A decade later, I was paying a mentor to help me with that. So it hasn't been till last year that I started loving myself. So
yeah,
yeah,
wow,
this the
wow,
sticky note just helped me. I'm not diminishing that because
right.
it helped me because I needed to repeat it to myself. But I'm just saying, till I didn't do the work, the real work, I didn't. I didn't love myself. I didn't
Yeah.
think that I was worthy. I don't think that I'm enough, so I have struggled with that too for a long time, 3 decades.
I think one of the things that I encourage people to do, and something I've done with myself is, um, I can see in me today the things that God sees in me and appreciates and loves. I know why I deserve love, and 10 years ago I couldn't tell you that the answer to that. But really sitting down and keeping close tabs and short accounts on on my attributes, both positive, negative, and neutral, um, recognizing what stuff I get to choose and what I don't get to choose. I get to choose what time the alarm goes off in the morning, but I don't get to choose um, how tall I am, you know? And so there are certain things that I don't get to choose. And so being able to accept myself for who I am. I have flaws and I make mistakes. And so and it's funny, when I went through my recovery program, one of the things that my sponsor told me was, dude, you are an egomaniac. You're an egomaniac. And so I'm like, and that rings true today. I'm still an egomaniac. I'm just pretending not to be. And or at least I try. And sometimes it works. My boss the other day said, because I described to her a conversation, set of conversations I had with an employee, and I was really transparent about, here's what I could have done different. Here's what I recognize that I did that could have gone better, and here's how I responded to try to fix it, and here's what I'm going to do next week to follow up. And she said, you're really demonstrating some humility there. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's like I can take that conversation and put it in a little bank account and say, I've been recognized by other people as demonstrating some humility. Now, notice I didn't say I'm humble, because that wouldn't be true. But but I can demonstrate humility from time to time. I'm capable of that. And so that goes in the good part. The part that I have to give myself a little hug and accept about myself is, yeah, I don't walk out. I'm not the perfect boss. I skin my knee every once in a while, just like all the people who work for me also skin their knees every once in a while. And so I got to be as easy as I am on myself. That way I can be easy on them when they skin their knees. Just like I want my boss to be easy on me when I skin my when she sees me skinning my knee. So that's where I think it's just kind of this process moving forward, where we build our understanding of our value um, through a process of knowing ourselves, being honest with ourselves, committing to growth, to doing some things that help us grow. And that would include stuff that's, service to others, or however that looks for you, because it's going to look different for every single person, which is really cool, because the world has lots of needs. You know, I just want to throw a number out there, and you can ask yourself what you think Jesus would be more concerned about. Um, about 10% of the world, plus or minus, is LGBTQ. Some people would say it's more, some people would say it's less, but it's, 10% is a good, easy number that a lot of people agree on. 1/3 of the world doesn't have access to clean drinking water. 12% of the population of the planet doesn't have access to a 2,000 calorie diet a day. So what do you think bothers our creator more? That I think about when I get, when I get excited, it's usually about some hot guy that walked by. Or is it the fact that 1 in 10 people doesn't have enough to eat, and I'm trying to limit myself to 2,000 calories? Like, I have a tough time because I got too many Happy
Yeah.
Meals under my belt, right? So what do you think is a bigger issue? And you know what? Commit yourself to the big issues. And the other stuff will work itself out. My sexuality doesn't doesn't I could spend years and thousands of dollars trying to fix my sexuality. At the end of that, I'm going to be the same guy. I won't have changed a thing, and all that money and all that time could have gone to actually doing something good.
Yeah, no, and I 1,000% agree. I have somebody that I know. a friend of a friend, let's just say. She's a lesbian, and then I tell people that know this person too, like, she's going to hell. She's not going to hell because she's a lesbian. She's going to hell because she got a dark heart. You know, she's nasty. But that I like that yeah, I see it as God still loves me.
Yeah.
He has shown in so many ways. Does he approve? No, he has a huge list of things that he doesn't approve. But he sacrificed his life for us because he knew that we were incapable of doing what he did. Be a saint,
Yeah.
come here, do his thing, not give in to temptation, love everybody, have his disciples that were all sinners. One of them denied him and he still loved him. But a
Yeah.
lot of people don't get that love part, love thy neighbor.
Well, yeah. Another thing is, and uh, people may not be aware of this little passage, but Jesus got upset a couple times in the New Testament,
Ooh,
and
don't say that. You're gonna start some stuff now.
so there's this one time that Jesus was really upset at the religious leaders, and he said they tie up heavy burdensome loads and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to help them.
Yeah.
And he referred to them as whitewashed tombs. And the if there are people in your spiritual community that are really quick to tell you all the things you need to do to be pleasing to your God, and yet they don't have to deal with it. Like, so for me, it was celibacy. Oh yeah, if you're gay, number one, you can't call yourself gay. You have to say that you suffer from unwanted same-sex attraction disorder. And so now that we've reduced my, a fundamental fact about myself that's unchangeable down to something that sounds like a skin condition, um, that's number one. And then number two, you need to be celibate. And I'm looking around the church going, none of you guys are celibate, right? You say you wait till marriage, but I know
Mm,
enough of your stories that you didn't wait till marriage. It just looks like you waited till marriage.
mm,
So like you're not willing to practice any of the stuff you're heaping on my shoulders, and it's killing me. It's friggin' killing me. In fact, a child growing up in a non-affirming home is 8 times more likely to attempt self harm than a child growing up in an affirming home.
yeah.
Uh, an LGBTQ child. Um, People in religious communities, this blew my mind. There's a book out called Heavy Burdens, 7 Ways the Church Harms LGBTQ People, and I probably butchered the title, um, but if you search for Heavy Burdens on Amazon, it'll come up, and it's relatively new. Actually, her book came out about a month after mine, and she quotes this study that showed that every group of people in that join a religious community, their self-harm rates go down except for one, and that's LGBTQ people. The study found that the more religious they were, the higher their self-harm rate was, to the tune of between 30 and 50% higher. And so, from a self-care perspective, um if you are in a religious community that is not willing to affirm a part of you that is not changeable. And I'll tell you, and you can read, the most entertaining chapter in my book is on conversion therapy. And it goes back and
I
traces
bet.
50 years. Oh, it's a it's a show. It's the kind of show that, uses a word that I won't say. But it 50 years of trying, and they're just guessing, but 50 years of trying because they believe that God doesn't like the LGBTQ. And so if God doesn't like the LGBTQ, God will give us the power to change. And yet the leaders from the movement are walking away, shaking their heads, apologizing for the harm that they've caused their followers, and saying, I did it for 20 years and I never saw anybody change. So, and it's not just one, it's not just a handful, it's dozens and dozens of key leaders in key positions across the country. So look, if someone's saying that you have to be something other than what you are, and there's a demonstrated history of not being able to change that, then you got to go find a more healthy environment so that you can survive. And or figure out how to be okay with yourself in that toxic environment and call it
Mm-hmm.
for what it is, and put on the right kind of armor every day when you walk into that environment, and know that they're just misguided.
Yeah. No, I get it 100%. I think it was the last vacation or the vacation before. I had a
Yeah.
conversation with one of my cousins, because she was saying it had just become legal in Puerto Rico for gay couples to adopt kids. And she
Mm,
went on and on about how traumatized these kids were going to be. And I'm just like, Jesus, take the wheel. And I said, sweetie, so you're going to tell me our other cousin that had an alcoholic father beat up his wife, or cousins are fine because they have mommy and daddy together, just a straight couple. Like, come on. And so we got into it. It was a respectful disagreement. And then I finished with the cherry on top saying, yeah, I'm bisexual, and yet you're telling me that I'm going to mess up my kids and everything else,
yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it was an interesting conversation. I still love her to death. It's my cousin. And with certain people, I just don't have certain conversations.
Yeah.
And
Well,
my family's huge. I can't like all of them.
so a story comes to mind,
Yeah.
and it's in 1974 when they pulled, I think it was 72, 74, somewhere in there, they pulled homosexuality out of the DSM-4, which is the manual that psychologists use to diagnose mental things. And you like my technical language there, the all the mental things,
Yeah.
uh, but anyway, it's um they pulled homosexuality out of there, and the reason they did that is that back in the 50s, a professor, Dr. Evelyn Hooker, did a study, and with these ink blots and all these other different psychological tests that measure mental maladies, and there were some very, very, very homosexual men and some very, very, very straight men, and they did all these studies with them, and then they took all the personal data off of them, and they said, here's the results, tell me which ones are gay. And nobody could do it. There was no difference in mental issues between the two of them. And that's what led eventually 20 years later to homosexuality being pulled out as a mental disorder. Well, in 1974, this whole thing about gays not being monsters was new to the world. Nobody knew any gay people because they were all in the closet. Because if they weren't in the closet, they were being institutionalized, fired, disowned, kicked out of their churches, kicked out of their houses, beat up, dragged down the street behind pickup trucks. I mean, it was horrible. So people stayed in the closet and they did their thing in secret for the most part. And so that was in 1974. You get a pass for thinking that gay people are monsters. But in 2022, you don't get a pass anymore because we've been coming out for the last 40 plus years. Harvey Milk did that for us. He said the best thing a LGBTQ person can do for gay rights is to come out. If everybody came out today, there would be no homophobia tomorrow, because you'd
Yeah.
realize that Uncle Jack's gay. Uncle Jack's not a bad guy. Aunt Mary's gay. Aunt Mary's lesbian. Aunt Mary's great. They're not the monsters that we've been taught that they are. So now in 2022, um, you want to look out the window, and it's just kind of like one of the things I do for fun is I fly airplanes,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, and one of the stories that I learned, they tell you, do not use the radio when you're on the runway. When you're on the runway, you're on the most hazardous portion of the flight. You're either accelerating to pull the wheels up off the runway, or you're decelerating to land. And so that's your only job. If the control tower tells you something, pay attention to it, but don't answer them, because your job is to get the plane off the runway. And so a story about this guy that got his plane on the runway, and he had been told to go out on the runway and stop and hold and wait for the first guy to get off the runway, and then he would be told to go. So he's waiting, and the tower says, okay, you're clear to take off. And so he opens the throttle, starts rolling down the runway. The tower doesn't hear his response. So he calls him again. You're clear for takeoff. No response because the guy's practicing sterile cockpit on the runway and he's on the runway. So as he's lifting off the runway, tower calls him the third time. Hey, did you hear me? I told you you're clear to take off. And the guy gets on the radio and says, look out the effing window. So this is what goes through my head when people are telling me how terrible LGBTQ folks are. It's like, look out the window. You're surrounded by us. We're not that
Yeah,
bad. There are bad, like you said, there are some bad elements, just like there are bad straight people,
yeah,
and there's bad all kinds of people, right? We could talk about the bad people all day long, but it's not like I'm bad because um it has nothing to do with whether I'm good or bad. And so, but like I said, 50 years ago, we didn't know any better. But now, look around. You know, it, like his politics, don't like his politics. Pete Buttigieg is an upstanding contributor to society, right? The CEO of Apple, one of the biggest, most powerful companies on the planet, regardless of whether you think companies ought to be that big and powerful. Here is a person that is a high performing contributor to a large company. Um, the folks that are trying to argue that I'm some kind of a mental defective because I'm gay, they need to look out the effing window,
yeah,
right? Take a look
yeah,
around you. It's and if you are struggling with this, if you're looking at yourself as, oh, I'm a queer, I'm this, I'm that, I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I look in the mirror. I don't even know what it is like to look in the mirror and see the wrong person staring back. I don't know what that's like. I don't even know if I've described gender dysphoria properly in that statement. Um, but I have to say that there are high performing, well adjusted, fantastic people that are all in any of the above. And that is a fact. That's one of those facts that you need to tuck away in your little list of what makes you valuable when the little voices start talking saying you suck because you're not as good, you're less than because you are LGBTQ or any of the other letters.
yeah,
When that voice talks, you point to that example that you've got in your mind of the person who's just like you, who made it, who's a contributing, valuable person in the society, and say, that's not what makes me good or bad. The fact that I did those great things yesterday to help those great people, that's what makes me good or bad. And that's where we get our sense of self-worth, self-esteem comes from that. And is real. It's a real thing that you can sink your teeth into. And that's what I really encourage everybody to do, is to start working on that little by little and give it some time, and you will reap the benefits.
awesome. I truly love my time with you, and I could have gone for like 2 hours easily. I can't believe like we're almost to an hour, and it feels like it's nothing. Like we just started talking.
Well, come visit the Bay Area. We can keep talking.
Yeah, I love it. So I will have your website and the book
Yeah.
available on the show notes. Is there anything else that you would like to plug in?
Yeah, the the book that I wrote is good for people who are Christian and trying to figure out what to do with their romantic desires. It doesn't require that you believe that being gay is a sin or not. I don't require people come away with that. It offers you options, not the way. It gives you options. It looks at the option. There's pros and cons. I am not a big fan of celibacy, but I've had people write me thanking me for encouraging them on their walk of celibacy. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm glad I did. That was my goal, but not personally, it's not my life. Um, and also parents. I've gotten a lot of feedback from parents that it really helped them because, especially parents for some reason in the Midwest, and pastors who are parents, and it's like, hey, my kid is bi, my kid is trans. and I didn't know how to deal with it with my faith, and this book really helped. A lot of times parents need a permission slip to love their kids the way they ought to.
Yeah.
And my book says, look, you can still think it's a sin, you can still think it's this or that, but your job as a parent is to love your kid, and to love them in a way that is going to be beneficial for them. And so, thinking of what's best uh for my kids. And so I've got a lot of feedback from parents, and some parent groups and some parent support groups have really come behind the work. So the website is tried2bestraight.com, tried as in TRIED, tried2bestraight.com. And my email, I love to hear from people. I don't hear from enough people. So if you want to send me an email, I would love to chat. I like to make time. And so it's Andy at tried2bestraight.com. And if there's an issue there, you can go find the website. There's a contact me. I get the emails on my phone. It comes right to a live person. So do that. And I like I said, I love hearing from people. I love talking with people about this. My favorite subject is why I wrote a book about it. So I'd love to hear from anyone.
I love it. And people reach out to him if you have questions or just want to talk more about religion and LB. Oh, LBTG. Oh my God, this is horrible. But I
Yeah,
have not kept up for like a decade because I've been trying to deal with my own life. But anyways, reach out to him. I really love his message and his mission, and I'm so grateful that like you wanted to come on my podcast. Thank you so much for your time.
great. Francie, thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for listening to another episode. Hope you have a blessed day.